Hello. If you look at the pimples of the corner of my mouth right now, you are a misogynist. If you're tuning in via YouTube, you are a misogynist. Okay, I'm going to start calling you Big Chungus. For those of you who are tuning in orally via Spotify or Apple Podcasts, congratulations. You have been promoted. One of my elite employee. You guys are an ally. Let's get into it. So every month I've been experimenting with a long form written content. I don't know why I just use the word content. It's actually my biggest pet peeve how everything, including art and the written word, has been reduced to content. It makes me want to scream. I have been experimenting with long form written format, essay, newsletter, whatever you want to call it. I promise you it's not generated by GPT. Last month, I wrote about the things that I loved and the things that I read and the things that were kind of occupying my brain. Last month, I was thinking about whether your desires are truly your own or something borrowed. Because let me tell you something real quick. I can tell when I have spent too much time on social media, particularly Instagram, when I start feeling the raging desire to purchase the trend du jour. And that's kind of like my litmus test for knowing, okay, maybe I'm a bit overstimulated here. Maybe I need to log off and touch grass. Last month, I was kind of wondering whether your desires are your own. And I've been kind of observing, okay? I've been looking around me. A lot of people look like fucking clones nowadays. Particularly with like the fashion trends at the moment. It's like you get a pair of sambas and you wear some trousers and then you've got like a top that exposes your shoulders. And like everyone looks the fucking same, dude. The rising popularity of run clubs. Like it seems like everyone's fucking doing a half marathon or a mara or an ultra or an Ironman at the moment. And look, I don't want to exactly yuck people's yum, okay? Particularly when it comes to running. It's like these people are getting fit, being active. I shouldn't hate on that. And I'm not hating on that. I just find it fascinating as a phenomenon. And I'm like, what is the mechanisms which have basically enabled these trends to kind of explode and flourish? The answer to that is social media. And it's also, another part of that answer is what Rene Girard, a French philosopher, calls mimetic desire. Rene Girard, a French philosopher, suggests that we often desire something because someone that we look up to also desires it. Desire is communal. It's contagious. If we desire or want something that nobody else wants, it sows the seed of doubt in our decision making. And I feel like it's a natural human impulse to want to have validation in our desires. Girard argues that people who we respect, admire, and find aspirational become models of desire, who subconsciously dictate what we want, who we want to date, what we want to do in our spare time, and even our life path to a degree. Our desires mimic, hence mimetic desire, those we are inspired by. The assumption that our desires are our own is what Girard calls the romantic lie. The lie is as follows. We want things independently of others, and we assume that our judgment alone is the driving force behind our desires. A bloke called Luke Burgess, who is the founder of 3 startups and author of Wanting, The Power of Mimetic Desire, writes that people often assume their desires are independent and autonomous, when just below conscious awareness, our desires are shaped by models of desire. In the 21st century, with the illusion of inspirational influences, social media is gasoline to the fire of mimetic desire, where likes, shares, and viral trends inflame mimesis, which is this phenomenon of borrowed desires. Burgess argues that certain people are less prone to mimetic desire than others, and that any society in which people are no longer struggling with scarcity but coping with abundance will undergo an explosion of mimetic desire. So in the Western influencer era that we find ourselves in, we have the perfect storm for mimesis. And as a former marketer, I can assure you that marketing exploits these mechanisms. these psychological mechanisms. Virality and scarcity over an object of desire all kind of smoke and mirrors to induce the compulsion to consume, particularly when it comes to influencer marketing, which brings me to my next point. I'm not Alex Jones, but I have a conspiracy theory. I have noticed the rise of corpcore, otherwise known as corporate chic. It's librarian core adjacent, and the aesthetic is very much derived from 90s office wear with a touch of grunge. So think tailored suits, pencil skirts, and striped button downs. The trend is influenced from the runway, with Boss and Jill Sander embracing office wear in their spring-summer 24 collections. But one can't help but wonder whether this is a plot from Big Corp to get the girlies back into the office. Dear God, I am not one of your strongest soldiers, okay? One glimpse of Bella Hadid in Corpcore, I'm done for. Pack it up. You want me to go back into the office? I'll be there, okay? I'll romanticize the shit out of it. My point with this is the fact that many viral trends and aesthetics, I think, are actually industry plants. They're corporations conspiring to move more product. Take clean girl aesthetic, for example. Clean girls aesthetic is a beauty industry conspiracy to implicitly make women feel unhygienic unless they buy Drunk Elephant, scrape their tongue, and get a claw clip, which has resulted in the astounding success of 10-year-old girls known as Sephora tweens selling out Drunk Elephant products with active skincare ingredients. So memes, influencers, and the rapid dissemination of information through algorithms are just some of the tools at a marketer's disposal to drive desire and demand. Not to mention the subtle and strategic way beauty brands have positioned themselves in relation to girlhood through the format of Get Ready With Me's, while women share their feminine wisdom, ranging from dating to climbing the corporate ladder. Beauty moves to the background, brands become associated with sisterhood, while women empower women through inconspicuous consumerism. My heart goes out to the impressionable 10-year-old girls who think exploring their femininity means spending obscene amounts of money on a 10-step skincare routine thanks to the narrow lens of mimetic desire. It's like gatherer instinct, but for beauty products. You don't realize, particularly in Western culture, just how much we are a product of our culture and our technologies. We exist within a cultural context. We do not exist in a vacuum independent of other people. And I think mimetic desire really highlights this, because we like to think that the line between our desires and the object of our desires is a straight line. We like to think that there's no social influence in our desires and what we want for ourselves and how we express ourselves and our life path, the choices that we make. But that's just not true. Humans are social animals. We are social animals down to our neurobiology, right? We've literally got fucking nerve cells or neurons in our brain that are called mirror neurons. Their function is to analyze other people's body language and behavior and intuit what the other person is thinking or feeling or wanting. We exist within a context. Let's address the elephant in the room. Every second person, it feels like, is starting a podcast nowadays. Obviously, I have a podcast. I am not immune to mimetic desire, but I think it's important to understand mimetic desire and the ways in which social media can inflame mimetic desire, which can help us begin to distinguish between desires that will truly fulfill us versus desires that we've borrowed. This reminds me of when Vogue writer and fashion commentator Alexandra Hildreth, I'm so sorry. Alexandra Hildreth quipped that you can tell someone's screen time from their outfit while spotting many a 6-hour plus screen time victim walking around Manhattan. Similarly, I too feel that my brain is rotting courtesy of the algorithm, when I feel the raging desire to purchase the trend du jour. So, how to know what you truly want? The first recommendation, and the thing that I'm always going to come back to because I'm a troglodyte and often dislike technology, is doing a digital detox. One thing that I found really interesting was that when I did my digital detox last year, prior to that, I was running so frequently, 5-6 times a week. And then I went on a digital detox and it was like the desire to run nosedived, went off a cliff. I didn't run for that entire month. It makes me wonder, like a little thought experiment, if social media didn't exist, would people still be running marathons? Would people be doing Ironmans? I know obviously people have run marathons prior to the advent of social media. I think it would definitely not be as popular. That is my lukewarm take. How else to know what you truly want aside from a digital detox? If you want to be less prone to just borrowing and copying other people's desires and copying other people's aesthetics, trying on their sense of self, I think it's very important to develop and have very strong underlying values, whether that's religious or philosophical or has another basis entirely. I think it's important for you to sit down and think about your kind of key values. For me, one of my key values is anti-consumerism. And that's how I know my brain is rotting when my screen time is too high, is when me, someone who's quite anti-consumption and consumerism, is all of a sudden like, yo, this top, I must buy it. I have to buy this thing. And it's like, in a few years' time, will you remember this thing you bought? No. Is this object, this product, going to have any lasting impact on your well-being or happiness? Absolutely not. Put that money into shares, bitch. When someone has really strong values, for example, anti-consumerism, it usually makes that person far less susceptible to the winds of unhealthy or temporary mimetic desires that lack substance. And maybe ask yourself, what is something that seems to bring me longer lasting joy without the need for more? I think you should be very cautious of becoming obsessively focused on what other people have or what they want. And unfortunately, social media kind of inflames this. It makes us all too aware of what other people have and where they're at in life, and very much pulls us away from our own sense of self, our own center, our own commitments, and what we feel would actually fulfill us. And I think it's also important to take ownership of your desires as well. Okay? Just because the fact that desire is a social process, desire is communal, desire is contagious. Just because you are not the sole author of your desires doesn't mean you can't take ownership of them. And I think that's important, to take ownership of your desires as well, instead of just living your life on other people's terms and what other people want. For example, a few of my friends have invited me on international trips away this year, and I've said no to them. And it's not because I don't want to go, but for 4 years have wanted to go to Iceland. The thought process is, why do I continue prioritizing other people's desires and wishes above my own? You know, similarly as well, there's so many places in Australia that I want to travel to, and that's become a priority for me. So it's important to take ownership of your desires as well, and not just live your life on other people's terms. Your friends are doing a certain thing, therefore you must do a certain thing as well. So yeah, it's just interesting. I recommend doing a digital detox, taking some time away, thinking about who are you when you're not performing for other people or for the lens of social media. What actually brings you joy, brings you fulfillment? What do you like doing in your spare time when you're not being watched by voyeurs on social media? So yeah, I challenge you to think about perhaps some of the desires that you have borrowed that maybe aren't exactly your own. Anyways, that's all from me. Make sure to subscribe to my Substack. If you don't want to be on social media, but you want to be notified and keep up to date with the podcast, then you can subscribe to my Substack, and that way you can get off Sucks internet and get email notification whenever an episode goes live. How exciting. Bye for now, and I'll see you next week. Bye.